please call the roll?
Sorry.
That's okay. Can you please call the roll?
Blake Ellefson,
Here.
Pat Kinney,
Here.
Dick Poofall,
Here.
Ron Stendor,
Here.
and Brad Ray's excused.
Okay, next order of business is election of the chair. I'll take nominations.
This is Blake. I'll nominate Pat Kinney.
Okay, there's a first and a second. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? One more time. Are there any other nominations? Okay, all in favor? Congratulations, Mr. Chairman, you're up.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to the election of vice chair. Are there any nominations? Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Is there a second?
I don't know who's making a motion or a nomination.
Okay, Mr. Stendor nominated Blake Ellefson as vice chair and Mr. Poofall seconded it.
Thank you.
All in favor for Mr. Ellison for vice chair? Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you. Congratulations. Questions or comments?
Please use the microphone.
Sorry. So we have a motion by Mr. Poofall to approve the agenda, a second by Mr. Sindar. There were no questions or comments, so all in favor of approving the agenda as presented? Aye. Anyone opposed? No, thank you. Next, we'll go to public comment. Is there anyone here for public comment? Is there anyone in the room for public comment? Is there anyone online or the telephone for public comment? Hearing none for public comment, we will move on to Mike and Steve. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you were gonna. Yeah. Next, we'll go to approval of the minutes from February 22nd.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion by Mr. Ellison, second by Mr. Cinder.
Ron, second.
Any questions or comments? I believe there's one word that's misspelt in there, but other than that, they looked okay to me. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
All right, Lori, can you please go look at the past minutes and find that word and correct it?
Sure.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to the discussion with our financial consultants, Mike and Steve.
Hey, good afternoon. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I see Dan has the report up there for your 2023 results. Last year when we started doing this, I think what we did, because your first quarter doesn't have a lot of activity to be too concerned about, we didn't do a report until probably mid-year. I think our plan will be is we'll start in July or in June, I think which would be probably your first quarter. So we'll do a first quarter report, but to kind of somewhat wrap up 2023, the last time we met, I think, was in February. There was still a lot of activity going on. Just to kind of give you a little kind of what was going on in 23. Some major things with Health and Human Services with their chart of accounts, which is how they track expenses on the county's general ledger. There were a number of entries that needed to be made because they started off, processing under the old chart and they needed to move things to the new chart. And they had like the public health operation within the general fund that has now been moved to the human services fund. So there was a lot of activity, making those changes necessary to reflect that change in the chart of accounts. In addition, since then, human services and highway have gone through, as well as I would say the general county have gone through and looked at accounts, tried to predict accounts receivable transactions, things due from the state that is normal course of your business. For instance, Health and Human Services administers programs and spends money to take care of certain people within the community. And there's typically, state aids that come to fund part or most, depending on the program that the person's in. Those sorts of calculations have to be done. It's not an exact science. There still could be some small changes to this, I would think, as your audit begins. So that would be the only qualification to this report. I have it as 99.9 and then I put unaudited on it, because usually when your auditors come in, they're gonna go through it with a fine tooth comb. They will find a couple things that, maybe people missed while they were doing their year-end stuff. But for the most part, things should be fairly locked in. You can see your general fund revenues are pretty much spot on. Human services revenues are a little bit higher than predicted. Highway looks funny because it's 60.8, but there was a federal project in there that sometimes the way that the state and the feds work some of their projects is you pay some the bills and then they reimburse you. In this case, they paid for everything and you only had to provide your share. When it was budgeted for that you would pay for it and get reimbursed. So that's why the revenue is down and your expenses are down when you look at down below under the expense side of the county road and bridge fund. Oh, thank you, Dan. Yeah, you can see there you're 55% on your county road and bridge fund, and I think 60 it was up above on the expenses. So really, overall, the results for the year, I would say, are pretty darn good. I think your general fund overall is right around 80 to 100,000. Yeah, I think it's currently a deficit. But human services is very close to breaking even, which their volatility of expenses can be very dramatic. So I would characterize it as being a very good year for the county. No major changes. Certainly with a $32 million budget, there can be a couple things here that impact you or make things look funny, but overall, I'd say you're doing very well. Are there any questions anybody has regarding the report? I would also apologize for Mike. He had a doctor's appointment. He couldn't adjust, and he said he would join us if he could make it. There was a chance, but it looks like probably not. Maybe the doctor was backed up. So
Steve, this is Pat. Could you go back up to that first page? On the debt service with 120.7%, could you explain that to me?
yeah, so revenues were up and I believe expenses were up there. And I think it had to do with the loan for the short-term borrowing. There was it was higher than predicted in the budget. So your revenues are higher because the loan was taken out higher, and your expenses are higher because you're actually paying it back similarly. So, oh, and I'll tell you this too. Yes, that's a good point. So the way your budget works is for the debt service function is you're basically setting your levy so that you have the amount of money you need to repay your principal and interest payments for the coming year. Included in that, if you recall, each December, the county has borrowed money for their outlay for the next year. And you do that to kind of make it count for the the Wisconsin levy limit laws. So if you take out a loan, you know your repayment schedule. It has to be known at the time, you know, you're setting your levy. And you take out that loan. So the revenues are in the prior year, so they're in December, but then you're spending the stuff the next year and you pay it off the following year. So there's a little bit of a timing difference there, but it doesn't affect your fund balance or your levy needed for that fund. Hopefully that makes sense.
Well, I guess it strikes me that we're a fair bit off of 100% on that, and I thought it would have been more predictable at this point.
Well,
It is totally just to do with the way the budget, the 2,491,000, the revenues coming in the year are based upon what you're predicting you're going to spend capital outlay and repay in the following year.
So
So
it's
there-
2 different years then.
Yes,
Okay. All
yeah.
right. So they're not linked.
no, and that's also a time period when,
Okay. All right.
and Mr. Ellison, you can correct me,
Okay.
but right, that time period when we passed the budget and then took out the loan was when interest rates were rising. And didn't they start rising at the end of 22?
Yeah, rates rose quite significantly back then, but I think, isn't there a benefit to us on our deposits or investments that?
Yeah.
Because we've seen a fairly sizable growth in our income on that. Does that just go to the general fund?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
So some of that difference here is offset by interest we got on money that we have in the bank too.
Yeah, I can tell you that overall, your debt service fund actually, and I'm having a hard time, how do I get out of full screen here to go to?
No, you're fine, Steve, because we're borrowing in 1 year, and so it's showing up in 2 different budgets, and we're not linking them together in the same budget. And so there's that variation
It's
in what the
just
other ways would be. That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a timing issue. If you look at your revenues, you have 2,056,000 of levy and 525 of expense or revenue, right? Actual. So what is that? 2,570,580. If you go down below, your expenses are 2,511,000. So you actually increased your debt service fund, I think, by about 70,000. So, and part of that is, I think, the budgeting of things like, I think there's some revenue in there for rental for the building. Oh, and that was the other thing, you paid off your building, I think too, right? This past year, the human
Oh.
service building, Dan?
No, we bought that property in, on the county forest.
Yeah, I think that was in your general fund though, but didn't you
No,
pay
we-
off the human service building and?
Yeah, yeah, we did.
Yeah, so that is part of this too, because that was not predicted in your budget. So you had revenues from, selling the building, but you also had to pay off the loan that you had on that building, which wasn't scheduled to be paid off. So that's skewing this too a little bit. But overall, your debt service fund increased slightly. And it was probably due to the fact that activity of, selling the building, you had proceeds, you paid off the note, you had a little extra there, along with a couple other revenues that came in higher than predicted in the budget.
And we also paid off some vehicles early too,
Yep.
for the sheriff's department, so we could do the lease program. I think we
Does that
cut
make
like-
sense?
I think we cut like 3 or 4 months off the vehicles.
Steve, this is Pat. Are you going to stay with us on the healthcare update?
I certainly can, sure.
Okay, because I'll have a question there then. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So next we will go to 8, the space study needs, and we've budgeted for that.
Okay, so this is something we did budget for in contingency. We budgeted $50,000 in contingency for this to do a space needs study. I don't think it's going to cost that much, but we wanted to be safe to do it. Approval to do the space needs study came out of PPLE, but because we're spending 50 grand, it had to come here too. And this, what that study would do, and Ron was on that committee too, is we'd hire a consultant to look at all of our buildings and talk to our staff and find out how much extra space or how much space we are short and what we need to do to expand. Basically, we're short of space, and what we need, how much more space we would need. As part of that would also be a security study too for all the buildings too, to see what kind of security upgrades we need. I can tell you on the security part of the courthouse, it may not be this year, it may not be next year, but at some point the state Supreme Court's going to be coming here and saying, you need to fix that. So, so doing the space needs study and security study gets us a little bit ahead of the game when the state finally comes in and says, you have to do something. At least then we have an idea of what we need to do and how much it's going to cost us. If this is approved, it would go to the county board. If it's not approved, it would still go to the county board because PPLE approved it.
So Dan, can I make a suggestion here?
Yeah.
Sure. So, if the committee approves it, I would say my recommendation would be to, approve the funding to come from contingency to the appropriate expenditure account to fund the space study up to $50,000. And then that would allow us, because right now it's sitting in your contingency fund, we would put it into the correct account where it should be for your state report purposes and stuff like that. And then we would move that budget based upon that motion, if that's the way you'd wish to go.
Any questions? Discussion? Someone ready to make a motion?
This is Blake. I'll make a motion to approve the 50,000 to do the space study needs.
Up to 50,000?
Up to 50,000 and make sure that it meets what Steve just made clear in his comments. So
And coming from contingency?
it's going to come from contingency so that we can do that in the right budget bucket.
So we have a motion from Blake. Is there a second? We have a second from Ron. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we will go to 9, the health insurance update. And seeing how Steve is hanging around, I'll get to my question right away here. 4 years ago, the county was underfunding the healthcare costs significantly, which also meant we were undercharging employees for their share. So now with the insurance company we have now, we've got this nice layout that tells us some interesting numbers. And the one in the upper left is the planned year-to-date funding ratio. That one shows 62.6%, which means that so far this year, we've only used 62.6% of what we have budgeted.
Correct.
So a number less than 100% means that we're coming in under cost. Over 100% at the end of the year would mean we went over, but we were anticipating both as for the county and the employee end. So when we got to the end of 2023, Steve, we had a finance meeting February 22nd, and we had some numbers through that. And I don't know if they were final numbers or not, but my question is this, the county pays 90%, the employees pay 10%. We target hitting 100% at the end of the year, and we were real close to that based on the numbers we saw in February. But what happens if we don't hit 100%? Say that ratio was under 100%, that really means the employees have overpaid a bit. Do we put that into a separate fund?
Here's the one you're talking about. From the end of the year.
So
You do keep your health insurance in a separate fund. It's not on your budget report because typically the county doesn't record the fund until the end of the year. So all the activity occurs in a liability account on your balance sheet, which is not the preferred method of doing that. We actually talked to the county about recording that in a separate fund, so it is kept separate. So both parties will receive the benefit of their pro rata share based upon, if you, let's say, you know, there's $100,000 in the fund at the end of the year. M3, when they look at your budget performance and setting rates, they'll take into consideration reserves, which I think it is very prudent to have some reserves in your war chest for both parties, because if you just tie it to rates and set rates to come out to 100%, you know, your rates are going to go all over the place. So to kind of smooth it, I would say having some sort of fund balance is good, you know, and depending on the size of your claims, because I believe what M3 would probably tell you is, at least what M3 and others have told me when they've met with me in my prior roles, is usually 1 out of 7 years is going to be a bad year for most people with health insurance when they self-insure. So you want to kind of have some kind of war chest there to get you through that. Now, you certainly don't want to build up millions of dollars here, because that would not be good for the county nor the employee. But certainly having something there would be good. So it is tracked separately. It's not something we show on that report because it's not something that occurs every month that we can report on it. We're working with the county to change that.
Yeah, and Pat, I'd also like to add too, that up until really last year, many times the clerk would have to borrow money from the general fund to pay the health insurance bills. Because there wasn't enough money in that insurance pool at certain points in the year. Last year was the first year we didn't have to do that because there was enough money sitting there. The other thing is with the 62.6% you see, we have to remember too, that it's still early. Everybody's paying their deductibles yet. It's not towards the end of the year when deductibles are all met that number starts going really high. And then you start hitting your 90 percentages. The other thing to look at is that with switching to Scout RX has dramatically lowered our prescription cost. I mean, they are literally saving us hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in drug expenses, prescription expenses. So at the end of the year, this number may well be under 100%. It may finish closer to like last year did at 98.3, which is
Yeah. I believe too, I just pulled up your financials from 2022. You did have $1.5 million deficit in the fund from 2022 coming into 23. So certainly it's good that you're, you know, going to have some surplus to help put that down. But right now, you know, at the end of 2022, the county had a deficit in that fund of $1,566,328.
And that's money that had to be borrowed from the general fund to pay for it. Now, when new monies came in, because every payroll, like HHS will cut a check to the general fund, you know, that helps replenish that money. But at times, there's just not enough there. And last year was the first year we didn't have that problem. So I'd say M3 actually set the rates correctly.
Right, so we were real close last year on the rates, but as far as that deficit goes, what are your thoughts on going through budget season? Are we going to whittle away at that and have a little more in reserves,
I believe that deficit's already been paid back.
the full thing?
Yeah, it was paid back in 23.
Well,
we need to,
so-
and Steve, correct me if you can look up
Yeah.
the number.
So in 2023, according to what they recorded as a journal entry here at the end of the year, you had 205,000 as a surplus. So that number would now be basically 1.3 million in the hole.
Okay.
So you are chipping away at it, which is good. It's a positive thing. But you're probably, you know, a couple years away from getting it back to, you know, flush.
So yes, so we do need to continue to set rates that lead to a surplus to pay that money back and also create a cushion in case we have another COVID year or whatever.
So the intent would be to err on the side of likely paying some of it back, but if it's a bad year, we may not accomplish that.
Right.
But in a typical year going forward, we should chip away at it, and that's what you're planning for the budget process?
Yes.
Okay,
And then, yeah, and I would assume 5 years from now would be level.
okay.
And I'd also say that deficit prevents us from going to something like the state insurance plan. Because then we'd have to come up with all that money plus another million or two to cover claims that would still be coming in to go to something like the state insurance plan.
Yeah, you're right, Dan, because if you were switching, you'd have run out claims that would come in, 3 to 6 months after your end of your plan year that would not be covered by your new plan, so you'd have to cover it from your old plan. Hopefully, M3 is, on top of that, and we're setting reserves and things, or trying to get to have a reserve at some point for that.
Yeah, and Steve, what you just said, before you and Mike were with us and Dan was here, we heard about the runouts and we said, whoops, we really can't do that either, so.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
One thing we could do is, and we have to talk to M3 about this, is expand the insurance pool to include the school district in the city. So they would all pay for their portion of it, but you'd spread the cost out.
so we had Kristen with us, and my understanding is she's no longer with us.
Yeah, Kristen resigned from
So
M3.
she was the one that we had that conversation with about joining other local units of government and creating a pool. Is there someone that's going to carry that conversation forward, or do we need to start it over again, or what?
Well, I can certainly contact the superintendent and the mayor if that's something this finance committee wants to do. I will, that's certainly doable. I'll be honest, that might help out the school district's money problems.
And it might take a year or two to get there, but a larger pool should give us better rates, all things being equal.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And, the other thing to note is I think the county's population is getting younger too, as far as county employees and school district employees and city employees.
Okay. So Steve, that answers my questions on what I asked you. So thank you for that. Are there other questions related to this? We've got one of the new members here, but the other one couldn't make it today. So the finance committee in the past wanted to see an entire year there because, as Dan said, it does fluctuate from month to month. So if we only look at the first 2 months this year, it's not very representative of what to expect during the year because it changes during the year as deductibles are paid, and things like that. So
So I'll put up
Yep.
last year again, just for a comparison again, so everybody
Yeah.
can see.
Yep, no, I appreciate the conversation. It is a very important issue for the county to keep tabs on because it's a major cost for both you and the employee. And certainly anything you can do to partner with local entities. When I was at the city of Manitowoc, we partnered with the school district and did like a near site clinic that employees could go to. And, we basically hired a nurse practitioner and things like that and contracted with Aurora Health down here. But, I could go there as an employee, basically very low cost, if no cost. But it was very cheap for the insurance plan to handle that, and we could fund it through our plan. So those types of opportunities are certainly worthy of exploration. So, and I'm actually glad this came up because I've been talking, about getting this recorded more often on your books, and this will just push it. So thank you.
you're welcome. Any other questions or comments? Moving on then.
The wrong meeting.
Next, we'll go to the number 10, the update and report on investments.
That's pretty standard, it's in your packet. Again, the interest numbers are higher because interest rates have gone up, so.
Could you,
And we don't, from what I understand, we shouldn't expect any rate cuts this year. Microphone.
I do not time interest rates. That's not my strong point, but based on what Wall Street's saying as rate cuts have kind of, the expectations have gone away. There's still opportunity for maybe one cut, but we'll see. I don't know.
Dan, could you scroll down on this?
Yeah, sure. Which one do you want me to
All
go
the way
to?
down. So all the way down, we got a 12-month CD and we're getting 4% on that, and the others, we've got 3%. And so of course, being a senior citizen, I'm all about CD rates now, right? So I'm just wondering, from an accounting standpoint, from the rules on accounting for municipalities and all that sort of stuff. And I know that in most of those accounts, we get the tax revenue, early in the year, and then we spend it throughout the year, in general terms. But is there any way of pooling some of these accounts and doing some 3 or 6 month CDs that would get us a better rate for at least some of this money until we anticipate expending it as we go through the year?
Do you
Mike,
want to answer that, Dan, or?
I think Mike or Steve should answer that one.
Yeah, so, I think analyzing your investments is a great idea. I do know that, for instance, right now, I think if you check the local government investment pool, it's probably over 5% that you're getting currently there. If you had a balance there and it's liquid, it's like a money market account. You can pull money out, put money in. It's very liquid. It's not even like a CD where you got to tie it up for a year or two or whatever term you'd be purchasing. So definitely would be something, worthy of exploration, like when it looks like that 3/27/24 must have come due, right? The one at the bottom there, Dan. There's a couple on here that look like they probably came. Oh, it came due, and then it must have been reinvested, or that's the date you purchased it, 3/27/24.
I think
That's the
so.
maturity date.
I
So you
think that's the day Tracy purchased it.
Okay, so that's locked in, but something up above that would be coming due, you could certainly take a look at, that again, in my former roles as like a finance director, those were duties that were assigned to me to try to maximize my investment income for my employer, and so that it's there's not a lot of science with what municipalities can invest in because you're restricted to things. You really can't do risky investments. The biggest thing that municipalities have to watch out for is you would not want to invest your core money, your working capital money that you're going to need to make expenses into anything that's a timed termed investment, that you'd have to take to the market and risk selling it on the open market. Cause like if you buy a treasury note and now you need to sell it to make your payroll expenses and interest rates have gone, way up since you purchased it, you're going to have to sell it at a loss because people aren't going to pay you what you paid for it because they want to earn the higher interest rate. So you just have to make sure you know what your core needs are and keep that very liquid. But then your other longer term money, you could, ladder it out and, put it out a year to 2 to 3. I think you can only go 3 years on a CD. So, you'd want to have a laddered portfolio for those types of things. And that would help smooth you through if rates dropped again, obviously that slows you coming up when they're going up, but it also slows you going down. So it kind of acts as a little insulation between you and the immediate marketplace. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the other thing is too is, Tracy has negotiated with Northern State to get some better rates. But we also do get better loan rates too. So we don't pay the same rate as you or I would pay. We get a better term from them when we do our borrowing. So is there a little float in there for the bank to make money? Yes. But overall, we still save money on our long-term borrowing. We just don't get as much interest. So there's the relationship there to consider also.
I think the conversation Steve talked about there with CDs and looking at what we can, that's not needed now liquid, look at those maturities and then try to see if we can get a little bit better yields on those CDs as we lock them in. I know I wouldn't be part of that because there's a conflict, but yes, I think rates, that new CD that was bought at 4%, I think that was that money we got maybe from the state to
Yeah, I believe that's the state money.
to pay for some taxes that were deemed illegal. And so again, I think that wasn't money that had to be liquid. So that was one that made sense. But again, Steve, if there's that ability to kind of like what Pat was talking about is maybe look at some accounts that aren't needed in a liquidity and see if we can't ladder some CDs, especially to lock in some of these rates now.
Sure.
And if we can do that, working with the bank that we're working with, that would, be good because we have that relationship which has benefited the county, with the loans that we do. So so if there's a way of doing this that still benefits both sides, but we end up a little better off with that interest. Because, a few years ago when interest rates were barely above zero, it was one thing what we got for interest rates. The rates are up now and they're probably not going back down to that near zero thing. They're expecting them to stay up. So the more that we look at this and try to tweak things, the more benefit there is.
Like I say, I think, so we're getting a point less than what we could be getting, but we also save a point on our borrowing. Is essentially how it works.
Well, but we need to look at the overall numbers of what we're saving versus, so how do we go about looking at this? Where does this start then?
Well, we've got to look at which funds we can actually consider and doing other investments with. Like I'm looking at the LATCF one here. That's going to come due in December, I believe. We're going to be using some of that money this year yet.
Yeah.
Well,
I know.
good. Well, we had earmarked that for joint dispatch. We're going to be spending a lot of it next year. Because we might have to end up buying a new tower.
I do realize we get money in at the beginning of the year and we expend through the year, so that has to be factored in
Right.
along with the other things that are, maybe come up that we don't understand. Would this be something that you and Blake could start the conversation with?
Yeah. Like I think this 12-month CD, that's been a CD that we've had for a very long time. It's been our one,
Yeah.
it's been our buffer. And I think that's one we could look at doing in other markets with, or try to get better rates with.
Any other questions or comments on this? And the other thing, frankly, is the general fund's a little bigger than it used to be, which is good.
Yeah. Well, we're trying.
We will move on then to the sales tax report.
Okay, I mentioned this at the county board, but I'll show you. Well, the first time we've seen a dip in sales tax. So this will be for the month of February. The other months have been, December was insane. January was very high too. February, I'm just trying to remember what was going on.
The weather was nice. The
Yeah,
weather was nice.
But there was nothing going on in January either. I mean, there was no snow, there was no ice, yet the numbers still were up. I do notice, if you drive by the hotels, they're usually pretty full during the week. So I don't know. I do know February tends to be a not so good month and March also. So we'll find out, I guess, at the end of this month.
Do we ever look at what other counties are seeing for trends, or is that not relevant?
Yeah, we do. And I can actually email those to you guys if you like, or put those numbers in the packet. PMA comes out with it every.
Maybe it just helps offset, because I know like we said, we've grown since I've been on the county board. It's been, hey, this is growing, and one little drop, not little, but a drop doesn't cause me too concerned. But then when you see, let's say 2 in a row or 3 in a row,
Yeah.
then we're
it's-
like, okay. And then other counties. So just getting a sense if it's concerning to you. I don't know that it's concerning enough yet, but as we go
No.
forward, maybe just,
No, because, I would look at the other counties, even like you look at the February numbers here, where we're just way off the charts higher. A lot of other counties were lower. So, aside from Milwaukee County, who has that extra sales tax now, a lot of the other counties were a lot less. So I think we're actually holding our own when you compare it around the state. I'm just, I'm just wondering what the trend's gonna be, just like you.
So you said these numbers are always 2 months late. So the number that shows up in the February column, the 224,000,
It's December.
would go back to December. And if I recall, a lot of people spent a lot of money in December on Christmas stuff.
Yeah, but you look at the previous year and you're still up 60 grand.
Yeah, and so if we just average this out over several months, if people spent a lot of money in December, generally they're getting their credit card bills in January and paying them off in February. So it's not surprising when we look at 3 months of data. But going forward from here, it'll be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, but we're also heading into peak sales tax season. And I do think the weather is helping us up here right now. I also think all this construction going on, 'cause it's a lot of people who are laying fiber optics and stuff who are staying at the hotels. Yes, there are.
Microphone, please.
I just was saying that there's some people staying here because of the work being done on our building.
Yep, they are here. Well, not today, but I'll get into that on the next item.
So Dick, on finance, one of the things we try to do is be a little bit conservative, so that we end up with more money than we were thinking on the budget instead of less. So on the budget amount on the line where those three are towards the bottom together in the middle for 2024, there's 1.875 million there. And that number is a little smaller than the actual number from 2023. So it's about 98% of the 2023 number. So we're erring on the side of caution for budget purposes of being a little bit lower than we think we'll get. And that way, at the end of the year, we're hopeful we have a little extra coming in than we were budgeting instead of coming up short and wondering what we're doing. So it's just erring on the side of caution.
Trying to stay out of a deficit.
Anything else on this? Ready to move on then? Next, we'll go to verbal administrator updates.
Okay, just a few things. One, our auditors are going to be here next week. So this room will be occupied by the auditors. Two, as Supervisor Ellison just said, building construction is going on. They're working 8 days on, 6 days off. They pressure washed the building completely. So it's actually pretty clean now. And they started drilling into the mortar joints to clean them out. And then that's going to be a long process doing that. There will be dust all over the building. So I don't know. I think we're probably going to have to keep plastic on our windows and not open them. They are blocking off the parking lots in certain spots so that just people don't get their cars covered in junk. We have asked staff to park on the streets when necessary. We expect the work to go on until August sometime, and which time they're going to go to OLL next.
Have they come up with the power washing, discovering any big issues or anything?
No, they haven't found anything big, not more than they've already expected.
Okay,
So it will continue to be an inconvenience all summer, but it will be nice when it's done. And as a reminder, that's being paid for with ARPA dollars. So while it is your tax dollars, it's not your property tax dollars. And then finally, as I was talking about at the beginning of the meeting to Chairman Mertig, we're going to be applying for a DOT grant with Bayfield County and Red Cliff. I don't believe Bad River is going to be part of this one because they got some other stuff in the works. But we'll talk to them again next week. Bill Bailey's doing the grant, so he'll be talking to Bad River about it. But what this does is the federal government provides 80% of the funding to put in electric car charging stations. So we're looking at putting them at the gas stations on Highway 13. Excel Energy would, by the way, then pays the other 20%. So there's no cost to the county. And there's no cost to the businesses either. So we'd be looking at putting out all the gas stations on Highway 13. They would get some level 3 chargers and some level 2 chargers. Butternut does not seem to be interested. So I was going to, Gary, if you could talk to that owner, it's free money for them, basically.
Is that for the gas station?
Yeah.
Because I've been talking with Mike quite a bit. down
If you
CB
could talk to them, this is free money. I mean, literally, the feds are going to pay 80% of the cost to install that. And then the Excel is going to pay the other 20%. And then the feds grant includes 5 years of maintenance on it.
Yeah, he's trying to buy some land from the Snowmobile Alliance.
Uh-huh.
So that's why we've been in discussion and, but I can give him a call later and,
Yeah, I mean, this is a win-win for everyone.
yeah.
And then there's a bunch of sites selected in Bayfield County and on Red Cliff. So we're working on that. In fact, the grant hasn't even been announced, just the it won't come out until later this month. But at least the highlights have been announced and Bill is already on to work on that. We do believe we have a good shot at that one because Bayfield County did apply for this one last year. And the only reason they were denied was because the state legislature had not passed new rules allowing you to charge by the kilowatt hour if you're not a utility. So, and today, actually, we heard from EPA about the other grant. They're asking for a little bit more information, but at least that means it's still on their radar and it's not a no. So Bill is gathering all that information together. And then I'll be talking to Mr. Kinney, Mr. Campbell, and Mr. Mertig about setting up an interview for a grant writer. We have 3 candidates, and I would like the 3 of you to be on the interview committee. So, and Pat, I'll email you the applications.
On the building, when they do that tuck pointing and there's that fine particles in the air.
They're vacuuming that up.
Yeah, but as far as the windows go, I learned this long ago, that abrasive dust is really hard on computer hard drives.
Yeah.
So if you get it inside the building, if you're starting to see that, it's really tough on computers. And then on the grant you mentioned with Bill Bailey,
Bill has did the last one at the EPA and he's doing the DOT.
so maybe this is for Gary Murdock and Butternut, but the land I own out in Bayfield County, a 1/4 mile from the south end of that is where they're looking at putting in a UTV park. And I've been wondering if there's a way of encouraging more of the UTVs to be electric versus gas. That would bring it closer to being a silent sport, and a lot of the pushback in some places is the noise from UTVs. So with these charging stations, if you think about where the UTV routes are and where these people stay, motels, whatever, campgrounds, if we keep that in mind, it might help to promote people buying electric UTVs here, which apparently are quite quiet compared to the gas ones.
They're not
Yeah.
very loud, are they?
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, I mean, just from an economics development standpoint, we've got people who are like, I don't want to listen to this noise, et cetera. But if we could use solar panels and charging stations to encourage people buying electric UTVs, we might actually have an advantage over some places where they're not doing that.
Mhm.
Because if it turns into more of a silent sport, then I think there'd be more support for it. And as far as people where they build houses and stuff, right now, if you're on a road where lots of those run by all day, you're less likely to want to build a new house if you're listening to that noise. Think the Tri-County Corridor, for example, if you're trying to sell a house on that and you listen to that all day, that's hard. So these electric charging stations with UTVs might actually be something, it's a little forward looking, but it could be positive for us also.
Yeah, I'll bring that up to Bill. Yeah, I do imagine there'll be electric at some point in the near future. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, the biggest thing with the ATVs, UTVs is in Ashland, we don't really have any trails except for the National Forest.
Right.
And most of the farmers or people with any decent amount of land don't want you on there with the ATVs or UTVs because you rip it up so bad compared to a snowmobile.
right.
So that's one of the obstacles for Ashland anyway.
Yeah, and sorry, I was joking because Supervisor Ellison and I live on the corridor, so we know exactly how loud those.
Supervisor Kenny?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Murdock.
Yeah, I have to leave. I have a 4 o'clock meeting at school here. So I don't want to be rude, but I have to run up there for a meeting, so.
All right, thank you.
And I'm done anyhow, Gary.
Okay, good. We will talk soon.
All right, we're ready to schedule the next meeting?
Yeah, so I guess, I'm really looking at what time of day do you want to schedule the meeting? And then do you want, and then the next thing is, do you want to say it's like the third Tuesday or the third Thursday or the second, whatever? So there's some kind of regularity to it.
Some kind of regularity, the second Thursday of every month or something like that at whatever time we decide.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm asking for.
If you guys are okay with me doing Zoom, I know Pat gets all cringy but that's why I prefer the afternoon, as I can be in attendance more at 3. So if you do them at 9, it might be harder for me to physically be here just because of where I'm at now, but that's my only opinion. I can do either one, and I see the white hairs here, so I can see that when you guys hear 9 o'clock, you get happy and smiley. Brad's not here, and I know where Brad sits.
If the county board meetings are 9, and I know at least 2 of you prefer the afternoon meetings, I'm okay with going with afternoon given we have 2 here that prefer that. And in my ideal world, it'd be a rainy day that you schedule these, but that's too hard. But I'm okay with afternoon for this.
Well, we can try to look at the calendar and move it if we know it's going to rain.
Yeah.
No. No looking at calendar.
So we'll go, Mr. Poofall, Ron, are you okay with the 3 if that's the way it works?
I'm fine with the 3
Okay.
o'clock. I just prefer it never
Yeah.
happen on a Wednesday.
Okay, I agree. Wednesdays are bad days. Thursdays tend to be okay.
Yeah.
I think we keep it on the third Thursday.
Can you use your
Third
microphone, please?
Thursday, I was saying Wednesdays are bad. Third Thursdays usually are, I can make those work. If that works for you guys.
The day of the week doesn't matter to me. Lloyd, with the finance and budget season, I do have some preference to having meetings when they make sense. So
Yeah, we could schedule other meetings as needed.
or if we have a schedule, but in a week or 2, you're going to have a lot more information for the budget, and waiting a week or 2 might make sense.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that too.
Would it make sense to maybe schedule for until June or July through those, and then, because it gets busier, I know in
Yeah.
August, and when we're starting to talk budgets, it can take longer, and we might need more frequent meetings, so.
And we might need to start at 1 or 2 instead of 3, that kind of thing. But that would be like, ahead of time that we're going to schedule that. Because right now I told department heads to have their capital budgets in by the middle of June. And that they should get to their committees by the end of August. So, so you guys have the entire thing in September. But some of them like to go early, like highway goes really early. So we can get theirs in July and start looking at it. And the capital stuff, start looking at it. So,
So we're looking at Thursdays, apparently 3:00.
or do you
That
just want
sound-
to, or you just want to schedule the next meeting for, do you want to do it in 2 weeks or do you want to wait till June?
Is there any reason we couldn't wait till June?
I think we should wait till June.
Do you really want to take it out to June 20th?
I think we're okay with that because then you'd have some numbers for us to work with besides the routine stuff.
I guess here, let me put a calendar on a schedule so everybody can, screen so everybody can see.
I mean, we haven't had a meeting since February 22nd, so
Well, and you could always call a special meeting too if you need to,
we were okay with this.
so.
I think June 20th looks good.
All right, if there's something we need to talk about earlier, you can always call a special meeting.
Yeah, June 20th to me sounds fine, 3 PM.
Yeah,
And then after June 20th, we may need more frequent meetings.
yeah. Do you want to put in July 19th for now? Just so it's there,
I think that might be good for people on planning vacations.
and then we can put August 16th in just for now too, so everybody knows.
Okay. July 19th and August 16th. Do you think 3 PM is soon enough on those?
For today,
July 19th is a Friday.
oh, July 18th then.
Okay. And then what other day?
August 16th, or that's a Friday, August 15th.
The county boardroom's not available. It's
Even
not,
after-
it's from the 13th through the 20th. It's not available.
What's in there?
I believe Heather is in there with some stuff.
Oh, yeah, well, let's put it on hold for now and I'll talk to Heather.
Okay. So the next meeting, June 20th at 3 PM, and then we'll go with July 18th. Do you want to do 3 PM or sooner there, given more budget stuff?
Let's stay at 3 PM for today. And then we'll see, at the June meeting, we can decide if we want to do it earlier.
I
That
think
sound
she
fair?
needs to pencil a time in on the calendar, though. We'll just tentatively put 3 PM on the calendar for July
Yeah.
18th.
Yeah, and then at the June meeting, we can
Okay.
decide if we need to do it earlier.
Okay. All right.
But that way, at least you have something to go on.
June 20th at 3 PM. Yep, June 20th at 3 PM.
And just so you guys know, I'm gonna be gone August 21st to 29. So,
And that brings us to a motion to adjourn.
Ron will make a motion, we adjourn.
I will second that motion. This is Blake.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
all right, thank you. Thanks, Mike.